Welcome to the Warriors Podcast, where we cover multiple topics and ideas every episode for all you curious listeners. Our team works together to research, edit, and post all our episodes. We have an amazing group of students that make up our team. We have Joey, Teresa, Fiona, Xavier, Kendall, and Yusuf. Our first episode is Phobias. Welcome to the first episode to end the spooky month of October. The first topic we will cover is phobias. Are you deathly afraid of spiders? How about heights? What about the fear of clowns? Well, these are all phobias, and we will discover what phobias are and why we have them. Today we have our teacher that specializes in psychology and is a perfect expert to ask about phobias. Please welcome Mr. Bohaska.
First question. What is the origin of a word phobia, or rather the Greek root phobia?
So, as it sounds like you already know, phobia comes from Greek, and the word phobia means either fear or an aversion, some sort of thing in Greek, and so that is why we use the word phobia to kind of classify irrational fear of something.
How does one develop phobias? Is it like a genetic sort of thing, or just a random occurrence?
So this is actually a big debate. You see this a lot in psychology of nature versus nurture. And there's some instances and some evidence that there is kind of a nature base to it and genetics, because there's certain fears that seem to be almost universal. And so there's this one idea of the collective unconscious where there's so many people that are scared of snakes or scared of spiders or scared of heights. And the idea is that because it is a legitimate, danger to people, that fear is passed on, in a sense, in our DNA. Another argument, though, is that certain fears are learned, and so that would be more nurture. And so you learn it either from, growing up around your family, and they, respond with fear to something, or they teach you to be fearful of it, and you get more fearful of it. Or you just have a really bad experience with something, and then just through association, like if you get attacked by a dog, and then now all dogs terrify you. So to answer the question, it can be both nature and nurture.
Now, this might be more neuroscience than psychology, but what happens in the brain when someone goes face to face with a phobia?
So while it is more neuroscience, that is still a part of psychology. And essentially what happens is it's your fear response, which is in your central nervous system and what we call the sympathetic nervous system. So whenever you're startled, whenever you get anxious, whenever you get stressed out, it's your central nervous system and that sympathetic nervous system that makes your heart rate increase. It makes, your pupils dilate. It makes you breathe heavier. All of that is your body's natural response to some sort of stress. And so we see that happens when we experience a phobia.
What is the difference between phobias and fears?
So in a sense, the main difference between a phobia and a fear is that a phobia is just an irrational fear. So the same way that you would respond in any fearful situation is kind of the same symptoms you would see in a phobia, but just kind of cranked up on the dial to 11. And so you can see people, getting fearful to the point of fainting or feeling lightheaded, sometimes bursting into tears, trying to avoid certain situations. There's individuals that have phobias like arachnophobia. That's a really common one, which is a fear of spiders. And just the mention of spiders, they can't handle it. Just a picture of spiders, they can't handle it, and they have to run, and go away until they calm down. So in a sense, the way that people respond in the various symptoms, both psychologically and physiologically, are similar to that of a fear response, just more intense.
Now, this one's something I believe a lot of our viewers would like to know. How would one get over a phobia?
So there's various forms of treatment for fears. There's one that I don't think is used very often anymore, and it's known as flooding, where the whole idea is, again, let's say that you're scared of spiders. So we're going to put you in a room that's filled with spiders, and eventually, you can only have a fear response for so long. The idea is that just being flooded with that stimulus, eventually you get used to it. It's been found that form isn't the most effective. And so usually it's more of a gradual transition where, again, I'm going to use the example of someone scared of spiders. You might originally just start with talking about spiders, then, maybe looking at pictures, Then, kind of a new advancement is using stuff like VR, so virtual reality, and putting them in a scenario where there isn't an actual spider, but it kind of seems like there's one, crawling around them, and then eventually get to having the real thing in front of them. So that kind of gradual form of therapy is found to be relatively effective. Another one is kind of figuring out what the root of it is. Because again, as mentioned, some fears seem to be learned. It could come from an experience. So kind of going back to that experience, talking through it and figuring out, okay, why am I so afraid of it? And then there's just some individuals that it's the phobia that they have. And especially if it's to something that can be avoided, sometimes just avoiding that fear and finding ways to kind of work around it.
Got anything you specifically would like to say about phobias?
Just one thing that whenever I'm teaching about phobias in my class, to kind of drill home that if you're afraid of something that isn't necessarily a disorder or a phobia, there are things out there that it is rational to be afraid of, things that can potentially harm you. But if you do find that, the way that you respond to something causes more distress than you would think is appropriate, there's all sorts of things out there that can help you. And so if it makes you unhappy, it makes you really fearful to the point where, you're excluding yourself from events or things that you would enjoy doing, seek out the help from a professional because there is things out there that can help.
Hey, great. Thank you. Anyways, that's that for today's topic. Thank you, Mr. Bahaska, for joining us today. It was rather interesting learning about the history and meaning behind phobias. Well, folks, tune in next time to hear the next topic that we'll be covering in the thank-filled month of November. Got anything to say before you go?
Have a spooktacular October.
Yippee. Anyways, see you next time.